Nor'Wester 76 was billed as a major rock festival. Held during the first weekend in June 1976, the event was to have featured several major rock acts of the time, including Bachman-Turner Overdrive, Blue Oyster Cult, and Heart. In total, about 30 bands were to play over a 3-day weekend at State Line Speedway west of Coeur d'Alene. But in the end, just a handful of bands played, and only on the first night. There were some early warning signs that something might be amiss on Friday night when there was a 5-hour delay in getting the music started. Jim Rascal was a 17-year-old rock fan who waited, like others, for the show to start.
And we sat at that speedway on the asphalt, because it is a raceway, and we baked Friday. It was a hot, early summer day, and for hours, with nobody knowing what's going on here. I mean, there was hours and hours of delay.
Finally, the show began with the Friday night headliner Blue Oyster Cult taking the stage by midnight. The Spokane newspaper reported the following morning that the delay was caused when Blue Oyster Cult and the sound company demanded full payment before the show could go on. Rock producer John Brower was a famous name by the time he helped put together Nor'Wester 76. He'd produced the Toronto Rock and Roll Revival in 1970. It was the first time John Lennon performed at a public show without the Beatles. Brower's whereabouts have been hazy for years, but this fall, a Toronto music magazine reported Brower had returned to town to produce a 40th anniversary tribute to his famous festival. We managed to get Brower to talk for the very first time about Nor'Wester 76. He says the chilly Idaho temperatures that night, along with a reneged promise of free firewood from the track owner, started the chain of events.
So you've got these tens of thousands of people show up there. They're half freezing to death. There's no firewood, and they started ripping everything made of wood apart. Anything that was made of wood was torn apart, and they started building fires. It's to stay warm. People started throwing rocks up on stage. They were really angry. It was really a ripoff. So the sound guy said, we're going to take the sound system down. We don't want people throwing rocks up on it, maybe smash the speakers. And the next morning, of course, kids woke up, and they see the PA system's down.
Brower says the next morning fans assumed no bands were going to play because the sound system was missing. But attendees recall a somewhat different story. Jim Rascal believes there were some fires Friday night, but not to the extent that Brower describes. He also remembers camping overnight, then finding a strange scene the next day when he entered the Speedway compared to what he expected to see.
So you get over to the gate to, show your pass or whatever it is. There's nobody there. It's like, oh, this is weird. Then you get inside and the vendors are all gone. And, it started to add up.
Musician Jim Clark played in a regional band called Salem Mass that was to open the show Saturday afternoon. He says when they came into the Speedway that day, they found a rather scary scene unfolding.
It was obvious, that something was majorly wrong because I noticed that the very last of the sound stuff was being wheeled into the back of a semi, and I walked up on stage and I said, hey, what's going on? To this guy, I think, who was rolling out sound equipment. He goes, man, haven't you heard? He goes, this thing's over with. There's, the guy took off, he's gone, and, nobody's getting paid. And I walked up towards the front of the stage, and I saw a bunch of very irate people out there, and next thing I heard was this kind of a and a wine bottle went right by my head.
Both Clark and Rascal recall the sound gear being taken down midday Saturday rather than the night before, as Brower maintains. Speedway owner William Eberly told the Coeur d'Alene Press a few days later, quote, the whole thing started when the sound man was not paid. Clark's recollections are echoed by the light crew from Blue Oyster Cult, who were there to provide lights and state-of-the-art laser show for the entire festival. On a Blue Oyster Cult history website, road crew member Ricky Ryer remembers trying to take down and load the lasers just as angry kids surrounded the stage. He remembers fans commandeering a truck with a large crane and making their way to the stage while one crew member tried to hold the crane back with a forklift. Just as the roadies managed to get the gear off the stage, the crane struck. Then the destruction began. crane was used to destroy the stage. The truck was lit on fire. All the concession stands at the Speedway were torched. About 8 trailers used for dressing rooms were lit on fire. An early dawn ice cream truck was rolled from the top of the grandstand all the way down the stairs onto the Speedway. A Freightliner semi-truck was hot-wired and raced around the track. All the time, Kootenai County Sheriff's officers waited outside the raceway. Kootenai County Sheriff Thor E. Fladwed was quoted in the Coeur d'Alene Press as saying he didn't want to provoke a Kent State-type incident. Damage was estimated at over $250,000. Fortunately, there were only a couple of minor injuries reported, and no arrests were ever made for the damage incurred. John Brower says most of the bands on the bill were ready to play. While Jim Clark's band was there, the Coeur d'Alene Press reported that Bachman-Turner Overdrive had canceled as early as the Thursday before the event. Their manager said they were also told on Friday night the festival looked like it wasn't going to happen. We tried to track down members of other bands on the bill without any success. Newspapers in ensuing days reported that John Brower and a Colonial Enterprises of Lewiston, a partner of Brower's, were threatening to sue each other. They also reported that Brower had left the area and there were never any further reports on his whereabouts. When we spoke with John Brower, he related an equally bizarre story of fleeing the festival site and making his way back to Spokane, and says he never left town with all the proceeds from the festival, as some had maintained. He says when he reached Spokane, he was taken hostage and moved to a downtown hotel by men with guns, who he referred to as investors, who he says planned to take the unused tickets from him so they could destroy them and claim Brower left town with all the money.
So I made like I was getting on the phone to call and get the tickets brought over, and managed to get through to 911 while I was on the floor being kicked, but they couldn't stop the call, and I gave them the address, told them the name of the hotel and the suite number, and about 5 minutes later there was a megaphone in the hall saying, Spokane Special Weapons, open the door, everybody put your hands up. So somebody opened the door, and of course half a dozen or more black-suited, RoboCops came charging in with guns.
The Spokane Police Department was not able to find any records of an alleged kidnapping for us, nor does anyone recall Brower turning in tickets. But a Coeur d'Alene Press article the week after says some sort of evidence was turned over to Kootenai County Sheriff's Office by Spokane Police. And John Brower says he did turn in the unused tickets to Spokane Police following his rescue. Kootenai County officials were unable to find any records of the event for our story. As for promoter John Brower, he says his future plans call for a book or maybe even a film about Nor'Wester 76. I'm Steve Jackson reporting.